Right, Dan, I guess with your permission, we should begin. It's 7 o'clock India time.
Sure, whatever you want. We're ready anytime.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. Uh, to all our attendees who have just joined in, I'm sure many of you are coming here not the first time. The Connection series, as many of you are already aware, the Connection series is a series that Flame University started time ago, where we try to bring the flame ethos of connecting the dots, looking at an interdisciplinary perspective to various topics. And to take this further, this today's webinar that we are hosting is the 13th of that particular series, where we have Professor Daniel Smith, who is going to join us and speak to us about identifying new ways to generate revenue. A bit brief about Professor Dan. We've got his profile there with you, but let me just introduce him very briefly. Dan is the former Dean of the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, one of the largest and prominent business schools in the US. He is also, and which is a great inspiration for faculty like us, Dan, one of the highest rated marketing instructors in the US by Business Week. So many congratulations on that. And has taught extensively across various countries like India, China, Croatia, Hungary, Poland, and the UK. Dan is also, worked for many multiple international companies as a consultant in such as IBM, Samsung, in the Solrang, etc. Uh, and we are extremely pleased to have him here. Being the advisory council member of Flame University. So thank you so much, Dan, once again for having accepted our invitation and being here speaking to us today. To all our attendees here, Dan will be giving a brief presentation about 35-40 minutes odd, followed by which we will have an interactive Q&A session. So do keep posting your Q&A on the chat. I will be taking a look at them, curating them so that we are able to save time when Dan finishes the presentation. So please keep on posting your questions on the Q&A chat. Just a little bit of sort of housekeeping. We will be taking questions only from the Q&A. So that's where we will be looking at, and the chat is not there with you. Also, Dan's presentation, he has graciously agreed to make it available to all of you who have attended today. We will be sharing that with you shortly, once the webinar is done. So without further ado, Dan, I would like to hand it over to you. Thank you so much, and all yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Niraj. I really appreciate it, and it's an honor to be here. Just real briefly, Indiana University and the Kelley School of Business, we've developed this wonderful relationship with Flame over the last, gosh, it's been 5 or 8 years now. Time goes by so fast. And I just have to say, if you had to create a university today from scratch, it would look a lot like Flame. When you take a look at CEOs, business leaders, government leaders around the world, the most prominent leaders oftentimes have found a way in their careers to get a liberal arts background, a liberal arts foundation, combined with formal business training as well. And to build a university around that concept of liberal arts and business and management, we think at Indiana University, this is the most important and exciting new university venture we've ever seen. And it's just really, I want you to know, I'm speaking for my colleagues as well, not just at the business school, not just at the Kelley School, excuse me, but across Indiana University, that it's just such an honor, and it's just very exciting. It's always exciting to be part of anything that Flame is doing. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I just want to again, say thank you to Mr. Nemish Shah for his vision in getting this started, and with Krutar Shah and Tejas Patani for their day in and day out work, and the faculty such as Professor Niraj. Everybody we've met at Flame is just so committed to changing the world for the better, and it's just an honor to be part of it. So without further ado, let's get going. And thank you all for joining. I know we were talking for a minute beforehand that we're competing with Netflix and dinner and so forth. So thank you for spending the time to want to continue to learn and exchange ideas. All right, so let me try the screen share. Are we okay? I'll assume we are. All right, so today what we're going to talk about for a little while is how do you identify new ways to generate profitable revenue growth. And the subtitle here that's really fun is it's the power of understanding the mind of the market and what that can do for you to open up rich new ideas for innovation, not in terms of big, huge product breakthroughs, but in terms of just day-to-day management of your established products. I can assure you that before we're done, you're going to see at least probably 3 to 5 kind of breakthrough ideas of thinking that you can use tomorrow immediately to start moving your businesses forward and your enterprises forward. So here are a couple of the objectives that I would personally have from this session. First of all, we want to develop together a customer-based approach to identifying new revenue opportunities. Second, what I really get excited about is seeing how behavioral and social science can provide tools to us to identify how customers purchase our products, experience our products, and if you really understand how consumers and customers are thinking about your products, you can oftentimes find ways to add value to their experience, and adding value ends up driving your sales. It increases your prices, your margins, and it's a win-win. The customer gets something that they want, and we get something as business leaders that we want. And then finally, I'm going to illustrate a lot of these concepts through an extended actual real-life example that I was part of a few years ago with a group of students from the Kelley School. So, you know, a lot of times we talk about these brilliant breakthrough ideas, and absolutely, you know, over the long, long run, you have to have a constant flow of major breakthrough ideas. But day in and day out, if you look at most companies, their success depends largely on how well they perform in managing their existing product portfolio. And it's sometimes not viewed as really glamorous. Everybody thinks about developing new big breakthrough products. But what we're going to see today is it's exciting and really, really fun to find new ways to improve the performance of existing products in the market. And you'll see with this example, I've picked a very humble product, as you'll see in a minute, to demonstrate how the social sciences can help us unlock new ideas for growing our businesses with our existing products. And the nice thing with existing products as a way of growth is you often don't have to make major expenses and major investments to get that growth. It's very profitable growth usually. So with that, and I'd ask Professor Niraj to kind of moderate this part of it, I think, or somebody back there is doing it. I just want to get us started here with the levers that you have to improve financial performance. And let's just start with a quick little quiz. Below are 4 ways that we can affect financial performance. So all else equal, which one do you think will give you the largest impact on profit contribution? A 1% increase in price, a 1% reduction in variable cost, that's just direct product cost, a 1% increase in volume, or a 1% reduction to fixed cost? And just share with me real quickly, just in a snap second, what do you think would be some of the biggest levers here to move profits? Go ahead, please. Professor Niraj, how do I find the results from our students, from our participants?
Yes, I'll just share that.
Oh, there we go. Great. Okay, so price, reduction in cost, increase in volume sold. Very good. Okay, this is really helpful. Here's what, thank you for doing that. This is really informative. So here's what let's see, I'm trying to advance the slide now. Professor Niraj, how do I advance my slides? I seem to be frozen here.
You could share your screen once again and try that.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm going to go stop share, and then let me go back in and do a screen share. And, oh, there we are. Okay, very good. Thank you. This is based on a study of about 2,000 companies, and it was done a couple of years ago, actually more than that, probably about 15 years ago, but I think the results are still kind of compelling. If you look at the impact of a 1% change, all else equal, in those 4 levers, if you can get an increase in price, you get about 11% increase in profit. Again, if demand doesn't go down, and that's a problem, and we'll talk about that. But as you can see, if you look at the components of revenue in particular, price and volume sold, they combine for about a 14% improvement in profit contribution in this particular study. Cost reductions, about 10% improvement, still very good. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is 2 things. During recessions, everybody wants to come in and cut costs, and you have to do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't. We have to be suddenly more efficient. But also, we see a lot of examples where severe cost cutting can actually hurt you in the long run by reducing, let's say, marketing spending, which oftentimes is what's needed to drive volume, or reducing customer service, or reducing product quality. And so the reason I wanted to share this with you is, revenue growth in particular, is that it doesn't require, we're not talking about trying to make drastic cuts. We're trying to grow revenue, though, efficiently. We're not talking about putting a ton of money into marketing spending or anything like that. We're trying to identify little ways that we can improve revenue without making massive investments, because we know that right now, in particular, we're faced with some pretty difficult economic times. So that was the spirit and the motivation for this whole session. Is how do you generate revenue growth without huge investment? Well, let's start with just taking a basic look. I always like to start with the end in mind. If you look at basic profit contribution, you've got volume times unit margin, no big deal. Excuse me. Volume, we can see, is market size and market share. So how big is the market you're going for, the volume of the market, and what's your share of it? And then unit margin, very simple calculations. All of you are familiar with this kind of thing. Price minus your direct cost margin, price minus variable cost. Now I highlighted these 3 areas, market size, market share, and price in red, because those are the pieces we really want to work on in today's discussion. And what I believe is possible, and what I think all of us should strive for, is to hit every single one of these, by the way. Ideally, what you'd like to do is be able to grow the market, get a larger share of the market at a higher price and a lower variable cost if you could do it, and hit every one of those. But for today, we want to focus on market size, market share, and price. Now, the big question is, just what I said, is how do you grow? How do you hit every one of those levers? Because as you might guess, if you try to raise price a little, what do you risk? Well, all of you are probably thinking to yourself, market share could go down. If I lower price, I can get maybe more market share, but I lose unit margin and I may end up losing money. So the question again is, how do I grow market size, increase share, and increase the price, the average kind of price I'm charging, but maybe not price, but unit margin overall. So that's the big question, and it's pretty tricky, but it can be done. You can hit every one of these, and little changes in market size, market share, and pricing can end up multiplying out to have a big effect on profit. Well, here's what's interesting. When I say that question, that's the big question. Here's the folks who have the answers. Customers out in the marketplace. And by the way, I should mention this. What I have in front of me here are, I'm going to use a lot of consumer goods and consumer product examples. But what you should know is everything we talk about today, every single thing I've used successfully with industrial products also, business to business markets. So like with 3M, with some of their industrial products, these tools that we'll talk about today are absolutely applicable to industrial products. So I want you to know that, and I'm happy to give you some examples later if you'd like. But here's the point. These good people we're looking at here, everybody thinks if we want to know how to improve, we just go ask the customer. Let's go talk to the customer. And the problem is, they'll participate, they'll answer your questions, but the problem is, in many cases, it's not that they will not tell you why they buy what they buy, but they cannot tell you. They simply cannot tell you. They're not trying to hold back information, but it's hard for them to tell you. So here's the exciting thing. We can enter in and look at some tools from anthropology and cognitive psychology, very basic social science areas. Anthropology, now many of you may know this, so this is just what anthropology is basically, is it's the skill set of what I would call deliberate, non-intrusive. So you're not asking questions, you're just observing customer behavior in the marketplace. Procter & Gamble right now, for example, has thousands of anthropologists that they've hired all over the world. And all these people do is walk up and down hallways of stores like these and just simply watch. They're called mystery shoppers. They're not really shopping. They might have a grocery cart. They might look like a shopper, but they're not. They're there taking notes, looking around, watching how people buy things. And every once in a while, they will intervene. So if I'm in the store and I see, Professor Neeraj, I might say, why did you buy that product? I'm having trouble myself thinking about, do I get this one or this one? How did you choose that one? And they're completely disarmed, and they'll often talk and give you some good insights that way. But generally, you don't even talk to people. You just watch and look at how long they spend looking at the packaging, look at what they read, look at what other comparisons they're making. So that's number one, the power of anthropology here. Second is the power of what is an area of psychology called cognitive psychology, which is understanding the way people use information to make purchase decisions. And I put this note in here, the unusual ways that people make purchase decisions or how they use information. Let me give you a quick example. See this person up on the right, automobile. A few years back, General Motors did an extensive study on the subtle ways people make automobile purchases. And what they found was shocking, is that the feel of the door handle, for example, when you open the door, the question is, people will tell you, I want a car that's durable. Well, how do you know it's durable? And you can read all the statistics, but the material of which the door handle is made and how hard it is to open the door, it shouldn't just open real easily. You'd think you'd want it should have a little bit of resistance to it, because that signals that maybe the car is pretty sturdy. The touch, the tactile sense, if you notice, some door handles have a heavy rubber almost feel to them. That tactile sense actually affects the way consumers perceive the quality of the product. When they sit down in the car, the next touch point is the steering wheel. how thick is it, the material that it's made of, all of that General Motors studied very carefully because they found that it actually has a material effect on how people view the quality of an automobile. And yet the consumer can't tell you this. This was identified by watching and doing some experiments, but watching consumer behavior and watching how people actually are evaluating the quality of an automobile. So those are just a couple of examples. Men's clothing, I can't help but share this with you. Notice this gentleman up in the upper right-hand corner has, there we go, up here has his hand in his pocket. When men at least, and I think with women too, what designers have found, fashion designers, is how do you judge the quality of a jacket or a pair of trousers? And what a number of major designers found very cleverly is that the lining of a jacket, of an overcoat, the lining in the pocket, that tactile sense, actually has a huge effect on how people perceive the overall quality of the garment. They can look at the stitching, they can look at the fabric, they can do their research, but at the end of the day, what they found was shocking, that the lining of the pocket and the way it feels has a huge difference. So they spent a lot of money investing in new linings, making sure the lining of the pockets are really, really special and give that consumer a really interesting feel in their hands. Again, consumers couldn't tell you this, but anthropology and anthropological research and cognitive psychology research tells us how to find these little ways of improving your products and driving demand. So let's get to an actual example. The basic idea here that you're going to see is how methodically understanding the mind of the market can have an effect on profitable revenue. So this example is like I said, it's an actual example, real example. This is a project that I did probably about, 15 years ago with a group of students and from the Kelley School. And the company is a US company, but they distribute all over the world, called Warner Ladder Company. And I picked a humble product like ladders. They've been around forever. Most people would say you can't differentiate a ladder. They are what they are. Good luck trying to grow profitable revenue with ladders. They're so basic. What are you going to do? Well, hold on to your hats. This is really interesting. So Warner Ladder has over 100 types of ladders. They range in price from US dollars, $30 to $650. Yes, ladders can get very expensive, the industrial kind. We're going to focus on the consumer market, not the professional painters and builders right now, just the consumer, people like us. The performance of the company had been flat to declining in revenue. The brand positioning for Warner Ladder was, we make the most durable, long-lasting ladder in the market. Well, that's great, but it's limiting, as you'll see. The primary customer was the professional painter, builder. They really didn't understand how to work with the consumer market. And so their consumer sales had been declining steadily over the years. So the end goal, as I said, the end goal we had with this company was how to grow share for ladders, how to increase, or how to grow the market size rather, how to increase market share, and how to increase the sales of the higher price ladder range, not just the low price. The process we followed was, first we did depth interviews with customers. We bring in consumers, we talk to them one-on-one about ladder shopping and their ladder buying behavior. Then we used the tools of the anthropologist. We went out into the marketplace, into stores, and watched ladder buying behavior. And what I'm going to share with you is shocking. And then it was followed by a deeper use of cognitive psychology techniques to understand the deep motivations for purchasing a ladder. Again, humble product, but there's some hidden motivations for buying ladders that we didn't know, and neither did the company. And what you'll see then, foreshadowing here, is that information helped us design a new marketing strategy for this company that had a huge effect over 2 years on their revenue growth and profitability. Well, real briefly, here's what we found. Is that first of all, people they don't think of buying ladders. They buy them when they break. And ladders that are durable don't break very often. And so people only buy 1 or 2 ladders in their entire lifetime. They had no idea of how ladders had evolved over the last 50 years. Because you only buy 1 in your lifetime, maybe 2, you're not in the market for ladders. So right now, Warner Ladder had over 75 different types of ladders. These beautiful fiberglass ladders such as this. There are ladders that are customized for working if you're on an uneven surface. It'll adapt to that so you don't fall. And there's just, it's an amazing technology to build these ladders. Most people, when they think of a ladder, think of this wooden ladder. Now, here's what was fascinating. When you ask customers, when you ask consumers, what is your price expectation for a ladder? First, they said a ladder is made of wood. That's a problem because a lot of ladders are not. The more expensive ones are not. But they're anchoring their picture in their mind is a wooden ladder. Price expectation about $20 to $30. The reality is a wooden ladder has gone up in price since the last time they bought a ladder. So it's now about $50. How often do you use a ladder? Well, maybe about once a month. You'll see why that's important in a minute, that piece of information. How do you learn about ladders? People didn't. They just went to the store. They didn't try to find any information on the internet. They didn't search magazines or talk to friends. They just went to the store and bought whatever they found. So in-store information was really, really critical. Now notice the change, the challenge we had in this project. How do you get a customer to spend 3 times more? Even for a wooden ladder, it's $50 versus 20 or 30. But we wanted to get the consumer to trade up to $100 ladders. How in the world do you go from an expectation of, let's say, $30 when they walk into the store, they're thinking a ladder is $30. How do you get them to go to 100? I mean, this is almost unheard of that you could try to do this, but that was the challenge we faced. Here's what's really fascinating. This is a layout, a store layout of a large hardware store that sells building products. Consumers come in the main aisle here. They turn down the ladder aisle and look at what they see first, the wood ladders. So this is important. Then fiberglass ladders, and then the specialty ladders up here, the special use ladders, like for uneven surfaces and so forth. So this is really important, as I'll share with you right now, is what we did after that individual interview is we went and we talked to stores and we got permission to go and just watch people buy ladders in the store. The students worked with a professor trained in cognitive psychology and anthropology, and we observed over 200 customers in a store buying ladders over a 2-week period. Here's what we learned. Almost all customers touched the wooden ladders, and they glanced at the label, and some tried the ladders. They would take the ladder, open it up, and get up on top of it. But they engaged with the wooden ladder. Now remember, the wooden ladders are right there. That's what people see first. That's what they expect. That's a ladder. A ladder is made of wood. They're not expecting fiberglass ladders. The second thing, they engaged with this product. The second thing is only 70% rather, of the customers we observed went beyond the wooden ladder. They just got it. That's what I expect a ladder to be. They picked it up and went and paid for it. They didn't even get to the fiberglass ladders. So right away, we got a barrier here we have to deal with is customers aren't even looking at those higher priced, higher quality ladders. The third thing we observed is that customers who examined the wooden ladder, but also physically touched fiberglass, they looked at the wooden ladder and they thought, oh, let me look at the fiberglass ones. Over 50%, once they touched the fiberglass ladder and could feel the difference, again, that tactile sense, wood versus fiberglass, about 50% purchased the entry level, the lowest price fiberglass ladder, which was about $100, or the middle one, which was about $145. So what we learned real quickly is we had to get people to engage, but not many people were even engaging with the fiberglass ladders. These next 2 points are also really important that we observed from watching people behave. We didn't ask a single question, we just observed. Is about 20 customers opened the fiberglass ladder, stepped up on it, and tried it. Of those who tried, if you could get them to actually get on the ladder in the store, 80% purchased the fiberglass ladder. So all is not lost. We saw a window here of opportunity. The student observers would then sometimes casually approach the buyers and simply inquire, gee, why did you get the fiberglass ladder? You looked at the wood ladder, why the fiberglass? And the answer overwhelmingly, it felt heavier and more durable, more sturdy. Well, that's interesting because the fact is wooden ladders are a little bit lighter, but not much lighter. And they're just as sturdy as the fiberglass. But to the consumer, it felt heavier and more sturdy. So now the question is, how do we understand that deeper meaning of why is heavier and sturdier more important? Why does that matter? So we applied a psychology tool, a cognitive psychology tool known as means end chain analysis. Now, by the way, I should have mentioned at the beginning, at the end of my slide deck, I have lots of other readings for you if you'd like to learn more about these. But if you just Google means ends chains, you'll see how widely used this technique is. But it's from psychology. It's from psychology. So again, that importance of having a broad, that liberal arts background. The idea here is that customer behavior is often driven by many needs they can't immediately describe when you ask them. But this means end chain, I love that picture, by the way. That means end chain sort of helps us look into the crystal ball and see people's hidden motivations for buying what they buy. Let's get an example here. So in this case, what we did is we brought in people who did buy those ladders, those fiberglass ladders. We brought in a sample of about 20 people who purchased fiberglass ladders. And we said, look, you indicated that a ladder was heavy. Why does that matter? So this is the key, ladies and gentlemen, is asking, why does that matter? Why does heavy matter? The answer was, a heavier ladder feels more stable. Okay. Why does stable matter? Well, it's less likely to fall over when I'm on top of it. Okay, that's fair. Tell me, why does that matter? Why is safety important? Well, and by now they're looking at you like you're crazy, by the way. The consumer said, well, if I get injured, I can't work. Well, why does that matter? Well, I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? If I can't work. But here's what's interesting. If I can't work, my family depends on me for support. It's part of who I am as a husband and as a father. Aha. We're on to something, ladies and gentlemen. You can't ask a question and say, why did you buy that ladder? And the consumer isn't going to say, because that's who I am as a husband and as a supporter of my family. You're never going to get that out of them. But at the end of the day, stability of the ladder matters because of this terminal benefit that it provides. So What did we see? We're going to get to the actions right now. So what did we see? Well, first of all, what's holding back market growth? We learned that there's low awareness of options beyond wood ladders. People only need one wood ladder. They replace it when it's broken. So we had to address that. What's holding back market share? And as it turns out, all wood ladders are pretty much the same. So there was no real differentiation, but no perceived differentiation between Warner ladders and others. What's holding back that price point trade up? And that's the real opportunity here, ladies and gentlemen, is how can we get people to move from their expectations of a wooden ladder up to a different price point? And their reference point was that of the wooden ladder. Well, look at what actions we took from these learnings, from this diagnosis. First, remember the means end chain about why is durability important? It's because of family safety and security. I have to be the provider. It's who I am as a husband and a father and a parent, is that I want to be a good provider. I cannot afford to injure myself. So we came up with a basic theme that your family is worth it. Your family is worth the extra expense. What's interesting also is if a ladder lasts 25 or 30 years and you use it, say 10 or 12 times a year, the way we presented price to the consumer, just so you know, in some of the advertising I'll talk about, in-store advertising, is it's about 30 or 40 cents per use over its lifetime. So we got the consumer thinking about price per usage, not the sticker price overall. Your family is worth it. Family safety security now becomes the reference point. You see what we did? We're changing the reference point from a wooden ladder at $20 or $30 to your family is worth this higher price. So we're changing the reference point. Then we developed two communication plans. One was before the purchase. Again, remember, consumers are relying heavily on in-store information. They're not doing any pre-reading. So we placed some magazine ads, the company, not very expensive ads, in magazines that were frequently read by people in the target audience. And the ads illustrated the different types of uses of ladders, or the different types of ladders for different types of uses. We never spoke of price. We talked about being safe and how having the right ladder, if you're an uneven surface, let's say doing windows, cleaning windows or something, that's kind of dangerous, or painting the outside of a house. You might want a slightly different ladder than what you use indoors to change a light bulb, let's say, where it's a nice, steady, flat surface. So we're trying to get people to think that you don't just have one ladder. Maybe you should have two or maybe three ladders, depending on what you're doing. So the ads focused on the right ladder for the right job, for safety, because your family is worth it. See how we're building that message? That's a completely new way of positioning ladders in the minds of the market. Then they get into the store. What we did in the store was really critical. Rather than having the wooden ladders, remember I showed you that store layout, and the first thing customers would see is the wooden ladder. We put the wood ladder at the end. So the first thing customers now would see are the nicer fiberglass ladders. And now those nicer ladders, those more durable, better to the touch ladders, become the new reference point. Whoa, I didn't know there were such ladders out there, says the customer. So they now touch and experience the fiberglass ladder, and when they compare that now to the wooden ladder, there's no comparison. So the wood is at the end of that lineup, so it shifts that reference point again to fiberglass first, not wood first, then fiberglass. And that's real critical. The signage in the aisle encourages people to take a ladder and open it up and test it. it lets people know it's okay to do that. Don't feel bad about it. Just take the ladder, open it up, get on it, see how you like it. So it was a deliberate encouragement to test the product and engage with it. I want to say, I cannot say this enough, none of these ideas that I just went through would have occurred without the analysis tools we just went through. Anthropological observation followed by a cognitive psych tool of means end chains. These ideas simply wouldn't have come up. Well, after 2 years, look what happened. Warner Ladder consumer ladder sales, again, we're talking about consumers, not the professional painters, increased by 21%. Sales volume of the fiberglass ladders went up 41%. So you can imagine what happened to the average price point of that portfolio of ladders. It went up dramatically, which is what we wanted to do. Here's what's really interesting. One of the concerns is that that the wood ladders would go down. It's called cannibalization, that purchasing fiberglass ladders would come at the cost of purchases of wooden ladders, which is fine. That's a higher margin product. So it's a good cannibalization. But what's interesting is the sales of wooden ladders only declined a little bit. That this demand came from new purchases of ladders that may not have otherwise happened. This suggests that, in fact, this strategy did grow the market size some, as well as market share for Warner Ladder Company. Before these actions were undertaken, the average price, that is the average revenue per unit for Warner's consumer ladder portfolio, was about $63. That was the average price they were selling, the average revenue they were generating per ladder sold to consumers. The strategy I just shared with you increased the average revenue per ladder by 38%. A 38% increase in average price per ladder. 2-year revenue growth about 47%. Understandably, the company didn't let us know how it affected their profit growth, but it had to have been substantial. So I know I've gone very quickly here, but I hope you found it interesting, and I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today and letting me in to share these ideas with you. And I'm ready for any kind of questions or discussions you have about anything I've talked about. And let me take off the screen share, I guess. Let's see. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was a wonderful session in such a short time, and kind of enjoyed it. Quite interesting, the ladder bit especially. Some few questions coming up. I'm not sure whether you are also looking at the Q&A screen.
I can't see them, yeah.
Right. So some of the questions, I'll just take one question which is related to the first part of your presentation, where you were talking about, how the price and the volume relationship there. So there's a question by Aditya who wants to figure out whether price hike will definitely disturb the output volume. That's what he writes, and accordingly profits as well. So what do you do in perhaps in some circumstances?
No, sure. No, it's a great question. And that's one of the real challenges I think all of us face when we're trying to manage that equation. Absolutely. Is to increase prices, sometimes even just a little bit, you oftentimes threaten volume. So there's two parts to the question, I think. First of all are there ways of demonstrating value, of trying to communicate value to the consumer like we did in this case, where it's not so much that you're raising, I'd ask people to think about it this way. Let's say that most companies, most organizations have a portfolio of products, as we saw here. The way that I find is the best way to increase average price from that portfolio is what we demonstrated today of how can we get consumers to trade up to a slightly more expensive a higher price option within our lineup, as opposed to always thinking about raising price of every product in it, which is our temptation. I guess that's the shorter answer, Professor Niraj, is that we often look at, I'm drinking coffee. So you go in and you see 5 different versions of coffee by the same company. And rather than thinking about raising price on each of them, maybe the question is simply, how do I get consumers to migrate up to a higher price point and a higher margin? So think about it that way. It's how we think about price. The second part of the answer, though, is how we frame price increases. And sometimes if we can frame them in terms, and by the way, if they're modest, very slight price increases, they're often not perceptible. And I mean, you have to be cautious with price, but that was one of the things that excited me about that research, is even small changes in price can sometimes end up adding a lot to the bottom line. But I guess the best answer I like is always to think about the portfolio of products and the average price, as opposed to just changing the price on everything.
Right. I think, yeah, that's, and perhaps if I may add one more bit here, you rightly mentioned, looking at making the customer go one step higher. Perhaps, at the same time, what you should also be focusing on, and that comes a lot from what we say in strategy as looking at pushing the value up
Yes.
minds of the
Yes.
consumer.
Yes.
That perhaps gives you the ability to nudge it up a bit, without
Exactly.
the volume. So I
Exactly. And I think that's the thing. In this case, what we saw, Professor Niraj, to your point, a lot of times understanding why, ask ourselves, why doesn't the customer trade up? Well, we found out why in this case, and we explicitly gave them a reason to trade up. You have to give people a reason to trade up. And I think sometimes we don't understand the reasons well enough to be able to make the case.
Yeah.
So, but your point is really a good one.
Yeah. And there's another question that Vandana is asking, and she perhaps comes from the services area.
Sure.
So how would you use this in the services context? How would you increase revenues there? Could you?
Sure. Absolutely. So this is another great question. So let's take services. The beauty of the service experience is that you take that anthropological tool of observation and watch all the activities that a consumer needs to. I'm going to give you an example also in a second, an amazing example of watch all the experiences, all the things that a consumer does in and around your service. So let's take a simple example that probably everybody is familiar with at some level. Disney. Yeah. Disney is masterful at separating you from your money, and you like it. I mean, so what did they do? You were mentioning strategy. So think about the value chain here a little bit. And Disney said, well, we're not just going to provide rides. When you get off of a ride at Disney World, let's say, or one of the Disney resorts, you get off of that entertainment ride, that's a service, you walk through a little store and you can buy souvenirs related to that ride. These are really inexpensive little things, but the kids like them. You spend 10 cents or 20 cents for something that you would never buy if you weren't there. So it's a way of extracting a little bit more profit out of that experience. But let's take a hotel. So I'm actually in a hotel right now, as a matter of fact. Take a hotel. Look at all the ways that the consumer is experiencing that hotel, where you can find ways to add value and charge a little bit more. Once somebody is in the hotel, if I want a cup of coffee this morning in my room, they don't have to charge me for it, but it's a very modest charge. It's like 20 cents. It's not very expensive. And, and yet, but when you multiply it over the course of thousands of customers, it becomes real money. And so what, I know I'm going on here, but services are the richest place to study. Just watch the whole exercise that consumers go through in experiencing that service, whether it's a hotel, an entertainment event, whatever they have, like movie theaters in the US anyway, you can buy your ticket online in advance so you don't have to wait in line to buy it when you get to the movie theater. Well, there's an extra charge for that to buy it online. So it's not charging more for the ticket without adding value. You added value because now I don't have to wait in line. And so there's all kinds of little ways to do it, but great question.
I think there's another excellent question, Dan, and this is much more related to the times that we are in. I would call them quite disruptive in a lot of industries, in a lot of businesses.
Yes.
So the gentleman or the lady has not given her full name. They just call themselves HD. So
That's okay.
HD would want to know that, what are your views on some emerging models that we see during these times when operational excellence, for example, many food delivery apps have now become, they start delivering fruits and vegetables and essential commodities. Some alcohol companies becoming sanitizer, that those
Right,
kind.
right.
How would you perhaps view that as increasing revenues?
Well, I think it's really been exciting. It's a great question also. It's really been exciting to watch how companies have pivoted, like the alcohol companies. We've seen this across the US as well, are suddenly producing hand sanitizers. I mean, if you think about it, distilled alcohol is really the fundamental input to hand sanitizer in most cases. So I think that the quick pivoting was pretty impressive. I think one of the things right now is I think we live in this period in an era of opportunity because people are afraid to go out, and any way, so for example, any way that you can find a need right now. So people are getting what we call stir crazy. They're pent up indoors. Is there any way that an organization can do anything to sort of modify or moderate that sense of anxiety? Is there, and by the way, I don't have an immediate example because I think it depends on the products or services that you're offering. But we know now that after being shut down for 3 months in a small apartment, people are getting very nervous. They're anxious. If they go out, they don't go out very far. And is there anything that an organization can do to try to bring some sense of calm and peace? And let me tell you what I'm starting to see in the US with, you mentioned deliveries, Professor Niraj, laundry services. And what people have been doing, we know of a couple of laundry services that they'll come, they'll pick up your laundry, they'll wash your clothes for you, they'll just take that off of your concerns. When they return them, they return them with a loaf of bread or some cookies or something just that's just soothing. There's something about just a little surprise that gives you a feeling that somehow humanity is out there. It's okay. We're going to get through this. I just asked you to do my laundry and I'll pay you for it. But they added some value. And what ends up happening now is that people would generally do their own laundry because they have the time. But here's what's interesting. What's happening now is people look forward to that little treat, say on a Friday, of having your laundry delivered back with some cookies or a fresh loaf of bread, a pile of fresh naan. And sorry, but it's been interesting to watch how people are outsourcing things that they could do largely just for the comfort of the little extra. And by the way, the companies charge a little extra, obviously, for delivering and picking up and so forth. But they've actually, a number of laundry services in town are actually making more money now than they did before COVID. So I think we're only limited by our imagination, but it begins, Professor Niraj, with knowledge of the customer and how can we add value to their life. Because they're not spending a lot of money on other things now. So they have money to give to you if you can find a way to address their concerns.
Yeah.
Sorry for the long answer, but it's exciting.
Oh, but that was a great example that you gave. Some small addition of a cookie really made a big difference in terms of what you nearly changed the habit of the consumer in some respect. Maybe during this time,
That's right. But a
they
cookie, here's the key thing. Sorry to interrupt. The cookie isn't just a cookie in this case. A piece of bread isn't just bread, something to nourish us. It was a sense of comfort. And that's what the cookie is, that you would never guess. But it was just, anyway.
So here's a couple of questions. I'm going to sort of get both of them together. There's one that's been
Sure.
asked by Shivam and Janki, which is related to advertising. And what they
Sure.
essentially want to look at is how do you use advertising to increase revenues in some aspects, say the new media, the social media, and so on.
Right.
Any thoughts on how
Sure.
to creatively?
Yes, absolutely. So again, that's what I loved about the example of the ladders. One principle, if our friends online today take one thing away from this thought about advertising, whether it's social media or traditional media, print media, TV, advertising works best when you have something new to share. Advertising works best when you have something new, surprising to share. That doesn't mean you've changed your product. It may be simply getting people to think about that product differently.
Right.
So for example, everybody, if in this case that I shared today, when you're seeing an ad or when you read in a magazine about ladders, every single company was talking about durability and safety. Everybody. There's no new news. But when Warner Ladder came out and said, it's about your family, whoa, I never thought about it that way. And it never dawned on me that a ladder is about my family's health and well-being. And they completely changed the story a little bit in the narrative in people's minds. It was something new. It was something to think about. Now, the next day, in changing light bulbs, often a husband's job, so to speak, or a man's job around the household, not always, but sometimes. Now he's out there shopping for ladders, and most ladders in the US were purchased at this time by men. Now he's suddenly thinking about, wait a second, it's about my family. When I get on that ladder, that's a different experience than what I thought about. So that's the real focus. If, again, I can't repeat it enough. If you're telling somebody something new that they don't know, that they're going to find compelling, almost just stopping them to think differently about that product, that's what drives success of any marketing communication.
I think brilliant. There's another question I would like to take purely because very few of us really look at or rather talk about that particular industry from a marketing or a sales perspective, and that's the real estate agency or construction agency
Yeah.
industries, essentially. So someone's asked a question, he's not identified themselves, but he asked a question that, it's very distinctly different from all the others. And how would you relate what you've just said? If you could, like.
Sure. So it's again a great question, and interestingly enough, and whenever anybody says, "Oh, it's different,"
Right.
different in, I'm going to get to an interesting, I think, answer here. I think whenever you say, "Oh, gee, it's really different," in many ways it is and it isn't. Okay, it's different by degree. So let's ask ourselves, why is, let's say, buying a piece of property, say a new home, let's take construction, let's say, and a buyer, whether it's a commercial buyer or a residential buyer, but let's just take a residential buyer, a consumer, since we can identify with that. One of the biggest, now we want to understand what are they thinking about that purchase. This is the single largest purchase most people will ever make.
Sure.
So right away, the risk and fear factor is off the charts. They're nervous, they're anxious. Second is, how do they deal with anxiety? And how do they deal with that nervousness when they're with a real estate person or a developer, a builder that takes them to show them a piece of property? A new home, let's say, or an apartment, a condominium. And there's a concern that here's where everything is similar. We need to understand what is going on inside the mind of the buyer as he or she is looking at that property. And my wife and I have actually purchased and sold quite a few homes. And one of the things we always talk about when we meet with a real estate person who's going to sell our home for us is how to sell it. Here's what we learned about people buying homes.
Right.
They have fantasies of what their life is going to be like in this home. They can't tell you that. This is, again, where you get back to anthropology. Both my wife and I actually have a background in anthropology and psychology. So we see the world through the customer lens. And we know that when people come through a house to look at it, they're trying to imagine themselves being there. And so from a sales standpoint, you need to be able to ask a lot of questions. Always ask questions. In that it's called a high involvement purchase. And you have to be the anthropologist right then and there. You see what I mean? You have to watch how they're looking at things, listen for what they say. If it's a couple, let's say a husband and wife that you're showing this property to, and they say, look, we could have our friends over. This would be a great place for the kids to play. Start listening and start understanding what they're looking for in a house. Oftentimes, the real estate agent will ask in the first meeting, tell me, Professor Niraj, what are you looking for? And you'll tell me. And it'll be, I need 2,000 square feet. We need 2 bedrooms. We need this, we need that. Very clinical. What they need is a lifestyle. They're looking for a happy life. And they can't say that. They just can't say we're looking for a happy life. But that's why that's what they're looking for. So you take them through that first house or first apartment to look at, ask a lot of questions. You have to be the anthropologist. Listen to what they're saying. And that'll start to reveal on the fly what really is motivating them, and then start to work with that. So the next place you say, look at this. This is an amazing place where you could entertain friends, or this is sometimes people will buy something for prestige. If that's what they're interested in, then you can highlight that as you show them different properties. But you have to be the anthropologist on the fly. So I guess where I'm landing on this, the shorter answer, and I know that's a long answer, I apologize, but the tools of seeing the world through the lens of the consumer are generalizable across every purchasing, services, real estate, everything. But it's a matter of really understanding what's motivating that decision and trying to work with that, as opposed to us saying, look at these lights, look at the sunlight that comes in, look at this big lawn, listen, and then work with that.
I think that's an excellent takeaway. I would go with Dan in this entire session that you have, and that would essentially be try to focus on the mind of the consumer, the customer, the buyer, whatever nomenclature you may want to give them. But I think look at that and then look at what you have to offer. I guess that's pretty much what is
Trying to fit those together and recognizing that if we directly ask someone, the buyer, they often can't tell us.
And
so we have to listen and look and watch very differently.
And this is also giving, sorry, but this is also giving an interesting insight about how, various disciplines, especially, psychology, anthropology, woven into, the business area, marketing.
Yes.
There. And
yes.
I also come from an operations background. So, we use the same work study method of observation even there.
Yes.
That's where, even in a very technical area, we still look at these disciplines coming in. So,
oh, absolutely. No, when you think about the basic engineering premise of form and function, and and function is derived from what does the customer need, and watching them carefully. Apple Computer has made a living out of this.
True. Great.
And a lot of companies, Tata, for example, has designed some beautiful automobiles that are so easy to get in and out, and they're engineering masterpieces because they clearly watch the customers.
Great.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So,
I'm fine.
I was just mindful of the time. Then we've, outrun our time by at least 6-7 minutes. Thank you so much for being so patient with us on the time frame. I know it's been early for you. Probably one of the earlier sessions that you ever taken. But to the attendees, we've had a very, very long list of questions, and I would certainly like to apologize to all those whose questions we've not been able to take. What we hope that you would have taken away a lot more from this session than simply the question that you've been asking. Plus, I think some of the takeaways that Dan has given through this talk of his, you will be able to use that in your business or in your careers that you would want to do. So thank you so much, Dan, once again.
Absolutely.
A brilliant session, and on behalf of Flame University, you have always been a very ardent well-wisher of Flame and supported us. So thank you so much for
thank you.
That you
and thank you, everybody. Professor Niraj, thank you. To my friends at Flame, thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for letting me be part of it. It's an honor. And I look forward to, doing more of these sometime. Just nothing but Q&A is just, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, it really is.
We'll start planning for the next one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Anyway, have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a nice weekend. And the next webinar series that we have is on psychology of sports, and we have Mr. Anil Kumble, who will be here speaking to us about the psychology of sports. So do join us next week between 5 and 6, and the details will be sent to you on email. Wish you once again a very good evening, a happy weekend, and stay safe. Thank you.